as a is to come down to the level of having the community step ownership.
Lagos State government directs businesses and financial institutions to give priority to the elderly.
Armed banditry. Presidency orders commencement of major military operation in Katsina State.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss COVID-19, the gradual reopening of the economy.
For a number of weeks now, the Nigerian economy has been paralyzed as a result of measures put in place by both federal and state governments to contain the spread of COVID-19 in the country.
But with the desire to balance the health and wealth of the citizenry and thereby prevent economic collapse altogether arising from the coronavirus pandemic, the federal government announced a relaxation of the lockdown effective the 4th of May this year.
And this easing of the lockdown is to, among other objectives, ensure gradual reopening of the economy in phases.
Now, Kira, you'll recall that the unveiling of the 6-week sector-specific guidelines for the jump-starting of the nation's economy, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, who is also the Secretary of the Government of the Federation, said that the planned reopening will be done in 3 phases of 2 weeks each.
And the phases strategy deployed by the government is meant to reduce pains of socio-economic disruptions while strengthening the health response.
Now, as part of efforts to ensure that the economy does bounce back, the federal government set up an economic sustainability committee headed by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo to develop a stimulus package, among others, to ensure that more jobs are created while the existing ones are retained.
And already, some federal government institutions have established funds to support the country's businesses, in addition to putting in place monetary and fiscal policies that will facilitate economic rejuvenation.
So, as Nigeria enters the second phase of the gradual reopening of the economy, which sectors are supposed to be given priority attention to ensure a healthy balance between the wealth and the health of the nation? And what does this portend for the Nigerian economy? What other channels should the government and indeed other stakeholders explore in seeking to resuscitate the economy? What kinds of stimulus packages should be provided to businesses? That will be our focus on Good Morning Nigeria today. I am Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to the program, our very first for the week.
And I am Kirian Umayo. Thanks for joining us this morning. We are reaching you live as usual on the network service of the NTA. And of course, we are broadcasting from our capital city, and that's Abuja. In the course of today's package, as always, we have the complimentary segments. For now, let's join Ifoma Ojenta for the morning news. Good morning, Ifoma.
Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Kingsley. And here is the morning news. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control says 338 new cases of COVID-19 were recorded in the country as at 11:10 p.m. of 17th May 2020. The breakdown of the figures shows that Lagos has the highest number with 177 cases, Kano 64, FCT 21, Rivers 16, Plateau 14, while Oyo has 11 cases. Others are Katsina has 9 new cases, Jigawa and Kaduna have 4 cases each, Abia, Bauchi and Borno states have 3 new cases each, Gombe, Akwa Ibom and Delta states have 2 each, while Ondo, Kebbi and Sokoto states have 1 case each. So far, Nigeria has 5,959 cases of COVID-19, out of which 1,594 were discharged, while 182 patients died of the virus. The latest statistics shows that Lagos still tops the list of states with 2,550 active cases, followed by Kano with 825, then FCT, which has 418, and Katsina occupies 4th position with 248 cases, while Bauchi and Borno have 215 cases of COVID-19 each. As the initial period of the easing coronavirus lockdown ends, President Muhammadu Buhari held a strategic meeting on the best way forward with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. The chairman of the task force and secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, gave a hint that new measures and processes may be introduced in the renewed fight against the uncommon health challenge.
What we intend to do now as a task force is to come down to the level of having the communities take ownership of the response. Let the communities acknowledge the fact that there's a COVID-19 that is deadly, that they can ravage their health and their wealth. And the most important thing for them to do is to begin to take personal responsibility on dealing with it. All of them should be overseers of their communities. They should watch out for people who have symptoms for testing and isolation. That way you plug them out of the community and you reduce the risk of further transmission.
And as the elderly are considered the most vulnerable to coronavirus pandemic, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has directed businesses and financial institutions to give priority to them between the hours of 9 and 10:30 in the morning before opening to the general public. The governor, at a press briefing on the update of COVID-19, stated that government will soon commence distribution of free face masks to hundreds of thousands of residents.
That you're wearing a face mask. It is not only to protect yourself, it's also to protect you from others. And so please, like I did mention at the last address, people need to take responsibility. We need to take full responsibility for ourselves and for our loved ones. And we cannot stop at ensuring that people do this at all times.
Meanwhile, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Boss Mustafa, has described NNPC as true hallmark of a national company. He gave the commendation in Abuja at the presentation of 20 ventilators by NNPC and partners to boost the federal government's fight to curb community transmission of COVID-19.
We have all from our different and diverse backgrounds have arisen in one accord with a resolute determination and trust in ourselves and in God to ensure that this pandemic does not overwhelm us.
Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouk, has formally handed over about 5,000 metric tons of assorted food items to Kano State government. The consignment was released to the state for distribution to less privileged to minimize the effects of the lockdown order in the state.
To ensure that the poor and vulnerable in the society, including the elderly and persons living with disabilities, are prioritized in the distribution of these relief materials because they are really the most affected in times of crisis such as this.
And talking security now, President Muhammadu Buhari has authorized the commencement of a major military operation to sweep bandits and kidnappers out of Katsina State. A major proactive operation by special forces, which details are being kept secret, is now in progress to replace the reactive strikes against insurgent camps. In a statement by Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, it says to give a full effect to the exercise, a planning team is already in the state selecting targets and making preparations for the execution of the unprecedented operation. The Chief of Defense Staff, General Gabriel Oloni Saki, who has been measured in issuing official statements on the oncoming exercise, briefed the President on the plan he intends to flag off shortly. President Buhari, who expressed sadness over the recent attacks in the state, extended his condolences to the families of those killed and prayed for the recovery of the injured. And that's the morning news. The program continues with Kirian and Kingsley after this break.
Thanks for staying with us. The program is Good Morning Nigeria. Now it's time for business news. The federal government plans to set up palliatives to assist micro, small and medium enterprises to survive during the COVID-19. This and more on business news with Abdul Karim Zurumi.
The setup of palliatives was revealed by Vice President Yemi Osibajo, who informed that these palliatives reflected President Muhammadu Buhari and his administration's determination to support small businesses and MSMEs in the country. This was all according to a statement issued by the Vice President's spokesman, Laolu Akandi, which also revealed that the Vice President performed a virtual launch of palliatives for MSMEs by the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control. E-registration of MSMEs or products at 80% discounted rate over a period of 6 months, zero tariffs for the first 200 micro and small businesses registered on the e-platform, and a waiver on administrative charges for overdue late renewal of expired licenses of small businesses products for a period of 90 days are just some of the palliatives the government plans for MSMEs. Meanwhile, businesses have had to adapt after the lifting of the lockdown, and they've had to take safety measures to help everyone stay safe. From businesses being online and conducting sales, it has become the new norm all over the country as well as the world. For online transport businesses, for instance, drivers are now required to wear masks or cover up during a trip. This is also true for riders, as they are also required to follow safety measures put in place, thus ensuring that they can conduct transactions and businesses safely. We will update you on the Nigerian Stock Exchange in a subsequent update once the floor closes. With business news, Abdul Karim Zurmi.
Many thanks, Abdul Karim Zurumi, for the business package. Coming up next is newspaper review.
And now we have Bayo Atebe here in the studio with us for newspaper review. Bayo, you're welcome.
Thank you, Kedia. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley.
All right, Bayo, good to see you.
Thank you.
We hope you had a pleasant weekend.
Very restful one.
Okay, let's begin by taking a look at the Nation newspaper. Above the name flag of the Nation newspaper says Air Force deploys special forces in Nasarawa, and Buhari others Katsina action. Details can be found inside. Madagascar asks for 170,000 euros from federal government for cure drug. That's page 25. Madagascar asks for 170,000 euros from the federal government for cure drug. That's 25. Lagos considers reopening of businesses, and the government sets conditions. That's on page 5. Below the name flag, COVID-19, President, that's President Buhari, to outline way forward today, says PTA, which is the Presidential Task Force on the Pandemic. Details on page 5. Buhari okays suspension of deductions from states' cash. Governors get 1 year relief to free up money for salary payment and others. And then you'll see the sidebar there, which represents in numbers the global number of cases as well as the national cases. 4.7 million cases worldwide. Unfortunately, over 315,000 persons have died, but you have at least 1.8 million persons who have recovered. The U.S. continues to lead in terms of those numbers, with well over 1.5 million cases of persons infected and also about 90,000 who have now died. In Nigeria, we see the numbers there, 5959 number of cases, fatalities 182. Active cases at the moment are about 4,183. Below the sidebar, you have a number of riders pointing to stories that are inside the paper. Kaduna to relax restriction. Katsina lifts lockdown order. Policeman on the run after testing positive in Abuja. Doctor infects 10 family members. Ogunwaye deflates violators tires, and why banks should fumigate premises. LASUF conducts study on drugs. Details are inside the paper. Banks reject payments to foreign business partners with Naira debit cards. And right at the foot of the front page says churches reopen in Borno and Zamfara. Page 5. Yeah.
All right. The Punch newspaper is where we go now, and we'll start above the nameplate. We'll start from there. Now, CBN Naira defense depletes foreign reserve by $3.17 billion. The story is on page 21. FIRS ignores Buhari's directive, sacks 9 directors. It's on page 7. And we've paid federal government $13 billion for gas purchase. NLNG. The story is captured on page 22. Federal government impounds British aircraft, alleges illegal flight. Begins probe. Is also on page 22. And now below the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, we had the lead story. Police lament absence of COVID-19 job allowance, face masks, others. It has 3 riders. We stand high risk of contracting coronavirus, policemen fear. PTF submits proposal to Buhari. President addresses Nigerians today. Lagos quarantines 53 returnees from Ghana and other West African countries. The story is on pages 2 and 7. And of course, below the photo story here, pastor fined 5,000 naira, bag 3-hour community service. That's on page 11. All right. Below that, Kano slashes political appointees' salaries by 50%. Page 2. And of course, page 12 actually. And we have Ondo polls, APC in dilemma over mode of primaries. That's on page 14. Now, no courtrooms for 16 out of 33 nominated FCT judges. It's captured on page 10. And then we have at the bottom, local government caretaker system undemocratic and illegal, says Bauchi governor. It's on page 9. And how I was rescued by police. Daughter of Unijos lecturer killed by bandits. It's on page 4. Gunmen abduct father, son, businessman in Benue raids. It's on page 9 of the Punch newspaper. Bayo.
Yes. Well, let's start with the COVID-19. Yesterday, we had 338 new cases, and these were found in 18 states of the Federation. Unfortunately, we lost 6 of our compatriots, and therefore, as of today, we have 5,959 persons that have tested positive. 1,594 have been discharged. Therefore, we have 4,365 active cases of COVID-19. Friday, we reported 288. Saturday, there was 176. While we were hoping that yes, things have dropped, beginning to drop, Sunday came up with 338. So between Friday and this morning, we've had 802 cases of COVID-19. Just when we are about ending the end of the first week of the lockdown, the consensus is that we are not beginning to flatten the curve. Meanwhile, already 4 states in the Northeast have eased the issue and have allowed what they describe as congregational prayers. They include Gombe, Bauchi, Adamawa, and Yobe. In the Northwest, Jigawa and Zamfara were joined only yesterday by Katsina, that has declared 1 week to open up the state and allow congregational prayers. The ease of the lockdown is being toned down in several states. In the Southeast, Ebonyi State has also allowed churches and mosques to gather in congregational prayers. Just as they are doing it in Oyo State yesterday, 31 persons tested positive, 30 of them in one organization. So the state government has been forced now to close that organization and insist on decontaminating the place. So far, Oyo State has had 107 cases. Lagos is to provide guidelines. They are to send officials to visit churches and mosques to monitor their compliance with ease of lockdown measures before they will now announce the kind of measures they will consider. Earlier on, Kingsley had read about the PTF committee briefing President Muhammadu Buhari. Ideally, today is supposed to be at the end of the first fortnight of the ease of lockdown. So what are the next measures that are going to come? Meanwhile, visiting President of Guinea-Bissau had brought in the COVID organic that we had all had assumed were a donation to Nigeria. I understand some euro dollars, thousands of dollars are being demanded for the COVID-19 that we didn't ask for. Well, I had thought initially they were ex gratia, they were given to us in, on the basis of African brotherhood. Meanwhile, President Muhammad Buhari has said that no matter the circumstance, the drug will have to go the required certification before they will be applied for use. Madagascar itself, that had COVID organic, has suffered its first death from COVID-19. A 57-year-old died. He was said to have been diabetic and also had high blood pressure. It's the first death since Madagascar had its first in that case in March. Madagascar today has 304 cases. On the continent, so far on the African continent, there are 78,194 cases. By way of death, we have lost 2,630 Africans to COVID-19. The world over, the infections are 4,677,068. The statistics for that is about 310,421. The United States, yesterday in 24 hours, recorded 820 deaths. So COVID-19, sometimes it will appear as if it's slowing down, and before you know it, it's picking up momentum. Look at what happened to us over the weekend. On Saturday, we had 176. By yesterday, it has shot up to what, 338.
Well, as far as Nigeria is concerned, we have upward trajectory of COVID-19 cases since not just weekend. We've been on the ascendancy all this while, and some professionals are asking, whether we have even gotten to the peak. You have to get to the peak first before you start flattening the curve. So the point is that we are still ascending, because the result of this morning shows that, as you rightly said, between Friday and today we have over 800 cases and 2 cases. That's just within 48 hours. Right. So I don't know. There are people who are in a better position to actually know the next step to take. But of course, the ease of the lockdown is highly appreciated. But with this rise that we are recording lately, it does appear that it's also a danger on its own.
It is a big dilemma for the authorities. I don't envy them at all in this kind of difficult situation. Here you are, people are already tensed up for being locked down for so long, and the pandemic, rather than abating, is also on the increase. The other one that has just come up again is in Australia. A doctor says that a person who has tested positive to COVID-19, if that person passes away, that is, he farts, his fart can be infectious.
And if he doesn't what?
If he farts, pass a wind,
exactly.
It can be infectious. So he was asked, what is the way to protect? He said, the only way to protect people is such infectious persons must wear PPE, personal protective effect. Other doctors are challenging that, however. He said that,
I'm not a medical scientist, not straight away. one can challenge that.
Exactly.
That's, if you break the wind, it's like, say, look, because you had COVID-19 in the past and then you're breathing out, then somebody who is within any distance of your breath, will necessarily become infected, with COVID-19. I think I'm sorry, with the greatest respect to him, it doesn't seem a valid proposition.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it doesn't seem
Other doctors have, however, accepted that, yes, there have been instances when they talk about SARS-2, there were instances where the stool of contagious person contain elements of that. And
you're talking about stool,
yes,
not fat.
But you're talking about
fat is gas.
Yes, and they are saying that yes, the gas, even a fat, when it is strong, can push talcum powder into a distance, and therefore, so it is still some other doctors.
I think it's a bit disgusting to be discussing this when
you see, farting is part of the human nature.
It's exposure.
Coronavirus has indeed put.
In any case, you have to have your clothes on. So which breaks the back?
The medical scientists are just battling, to know what this virus is all about. There are so many researches going on.
Because this thing is so new.
Exactly.
There are so many dimensions to coverage.
I hope we don't get to hear one day that somebody who has coronavirus, if the person waves at you like this. But there's a story there. It's not exactly related. It's from the aviation industry.
Yes.
Kieran, I think you picked that up from the Punch. By the Nigerian government impounding an aircraft registered in Britain for running.
Flare aviation aircraft from United Kingdom.
Yes.
Its mission was to come and evacuate persons. And when you come in such mission, it is a special dispensation because airports are closed. But after the list of persons who are on the manifest to be evacuated, there were other surplus, and they started asking them to pay at commercial rate. Therefore, they have converted their operation into commercial places, and that is why they've now been. You recall that just last week too, our airpiece was due to lift some of our Nigerian evacuees from Canada, and they had to stop the aircraft because they said it didn't have a license. And our foreign affairs office
landing permit.
And our foreign affairs had to say, well, this is a special dispensation for an emergency. But they were talking at the diplomatic level to resolve that. But this one is trying to convert an emergency evacuation operation service to a commercial service.
Because of surplus,
there will be fines for all of that. I hope they impose it without any mercy, as it were, because rules are rules. You obey those rules, and then to the extent that your aircraft remains parked on the apron there, you continue to also pay.
For me, why not just tax the airline? Let them get paid, and you tax whatever they paid.
No, it's not tax. It's not tax. It's a fine.
It's a fine.
No,
It's a fine. It's not a tax. It's a fine. But there is also a story from the aviation industry. We don't have it. It was a story that was trending over the weekend that the various agencies under the Ministry of Aviation that still have their operational headquarters in Lagos have been directed to relocate to Abuja within 45 days. I was just wondering, you give 45 days when we're still having this modified lockdown. There is no interstate movement. The airports remain closed except for very essential flights. So when does the 45-day deadline begin to count? Is it after
the lockdown
or while this lockdown is on? In any case, what is the rationale? The ministry may have, of course, its rationale for insisting on those agencies relocating their headquarters to Abuja. But we saw this happen in 1996 when the then head of state, military head of state, General Sani Abacha, directed that all federal agencies should have their headquarters located to Abuja. And you saw the kind of dislocations and disruptions that it caused. So is it under this kind of atmosphere that such instructions will be given? Of course, those involved are Civil Aviation Authority, NAMA, and FAN. But so is this a period? Because you're not just moving the office, you are moving human beings, you are moving documents. So is it now they're going to be searching for accommodation? There's a great deal of inconvenience.
Well, yeah, it's
I think the issue of movement has been on for a long time. Like you said, since 1996 when it first started. You recall also in 1999, some agencies like the waterways had moved to Abuja, and the president said they had no business being in Abuja when their whole operation related to the sea and the port are in Lagos, and so they should go back. But I wonder why the Nigerian Aviation Authority had not moved. Maybe because the main international airport then was at Murtala Mohammed International Airport, but it was a long-standing instruction. But to enforce that now, it looks like as if it is being enforcing a right order in a wrong period.
All right, let's take the editorial for today, and that's on the need to implement the Orosanye report. Orosanye report primarily was aimed at merging some establishments, that are handling a similar responsibility, and it affects almost all sectors of the economy. And Bayo now coming to let us know the very crucial ones, because this call had come since 2 weeks now, and we've not heard from government directly, but on the social media and the other media outlets, we keep hearing that there's been a directive from the presidency for Orosanye report to be revisited, and of course action taken.
Well, the editorial is saying that COVID-19 has touched almost every way we live, and the imperative now is that the personnel cost that goes into governance is too high. Editorial is citing about 2.8 trillion, and government cannot afford this. And the president directed that the 2011-2012 Steve Orosanye report should be implemented. And you will recall that the report was submitted in 2012, and in fact a white paper on it had been published. The white paper had actually indicated that of all the, at that time when they did, there were about 541 parastatals, commissions and agencies. The report had got them, the agencies reduced to about 263 and another 161. But of recent, President Muhammadu Buhari has directed that government cannot continue with that burden, and so that report has to be implemented. Originally, some of the broadcast institutions were said to have been merged, also to be merged as some corrupting fighting agencies. But we don't know whether the directive is to implement the recommendations of Orosanye report or to implement the white paper that came after it.
But I think it's important for a total review of this, because in terms of merging some establishments, you have to understand the intricacies of the of such establishments, even when they are similar in nature. Because in the long run, if you study some of them, it's called that there's always a place that diverse from each other, in terms of responsibility, is a good idea. And again, it's going to bring about retrenchment of workers. That is the fear, because when you merge, there will be reduction in number of staff that are working in such establishment. That's the fear of many Nigerians.
Yeah, well, that's it. But by the question you asked, are they going back to the report or to the white paper? I mean, the processes of government are such that once there's a white paper, that tells you the comment or the views of government on a report that was submitted to it, unless for good cause, the government has reason to revisit the report, aspects of the report that may then guide it for subsequent. Otherwise, the takeoff point will be the white paper already issued on that. Bayo Atebi, we'd like to thank you for being around. We didn't have time to discuss what happened in Enugu, where the governor and his team were said to be emergency vulcanizers, deflating the tires of violators of the lockdown. So we'll see you again tomorrow, Bayo.
Tomorrow will be another day.
Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing how to reopen the economy in the course of or after the lockdown.
You are still watching Good Morning Nigeria. And now, to avoid economic crisis arising from the coronavirus pandemic, the federal government has begun preparation to reopen the nation's economy for businesses to thrive again. Let's now join Abdul Malik Adil on the steps taken so far to achieve that objective.
For more than 4 weeks, the Nigerian economy has witnessed an unprecedented inactivity as a result of measures put in place to combat the COVID-19 pandemic ravaging the world. While these measures are not peculiar to Nigeria, experts, however, insist that it is not sustainable, especially for a developing country like Nigeria. It is in realization of this and to balance the health and wealth of the nation that the federal government unveiled plans for a gradual reopening of the economy, spanning a total of 6 weeks and broken into 3 tranches of 2 weeks each. Chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 and Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, says the whole idea is to mitigate and cushion the impact the destruction has had on Nigerians. This is in addition to strengthening public health response, which would ultimately fast-track the recovery of the economy and provide succor to the poor and vulnerable of the society. The process of easing the lockdown required sacrifices on all fronts. This necessitated a guideline which spelled out conduct in public and private places. The strategy included partial restriction of movement, which limited the total operational hours for all commercial banks nationwide from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Interstate travels remained banned except for the movement of goods, especially agro products, petroleum products, and other essential services. There was also an overnight curfew imposition nationwide, which commenced from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. daily. Air travel ban was extended for both local and international flight, with exemptions to citizens returning from other countries, arranged by the federal government. This also comes with a caveat that a mandatory supervised isolation of persons arriving from outside the country be observed for at least 14 days. Experts say, in spite of the COVID-19 challenges, the gradual reopening of the economy is paying off, with Nigerian agricultural produce such as vegetables, hibiscus, jasmine, melon, and other farm produce still in high demand from Europe, Asia, and America. With the gradual reopening of the economy amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, the big question is, what does this portend for the Nigerian economy? What other channels should the Nigerian government and other stakeholders explore in resuscitating the nation's economy? Guest on Good Morning Nigeria will provide answers to this and more questions shortly.
Many thanks, Abdul Malik Adio, for that backgrounder. Joining us now to discuss the issue in further detail. Here in the Abuja studios, we would like to welcome Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Capital Market, Nasarawa State University in Kefi, and also one-time Commissioner for Finance in Imo State. Prof, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, and joining us from our Benin Network Center, we have another regular face on Good Morning Nigeria is Professor Michael Baden. Professor Michael Baden is a professor of economics and also a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Prof, good morning and welcome.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. It's my pleasure to be with you.
All right, and joining us from our Kano studio is Associate Professor of Business Entrepreneurship and Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Kaduna State University, Yoshua Ango. Prof, you're welcome to the program. You're welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning.
Via Skype from Lagos. First, we'd like to introduce Dr. Moda Yusuf, Director General of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industries. So it's good to have you this morning with us on the show.
Good morning.
And also in Lagos, we have Dr. Timothy Olaole. Dr. Olaole is the Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Good morning to you and welcome to the program.
All right, gentlemen, pleasure to have you again join us on the program. Let's see, we didn't get a response, Kieran, from Dr. Olawale, but I hope that's okay. Let's kick off with Moda Yusuf, who is Director General of SCCI, and indeed, for the other guests, there was always the tension between the necessity of preserving life, which the various responses to the coronavirus pandemic necessitated, as well as, of course, ensuring that livelihoods were not imperiled. But here we are, several weeks now, the tension continues. In your opinion, is this the right time to begin to reduce the tension by further opening up the economy? And if so, what would you like to see?
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria. The capacity of the government, whether the federal government or the state government, to manage the social consequences of a prolonged lockdown is very weak. We had that experience in the first phase of the lockdown. We knew the social problems that we had. We knew the security problems that we had across the country, particularly in Lagos. And we also observed the limited capacity of government to deal with these social consequences. The palliatives and all of that government was trying to put in place didn't quite have the right kind of impact. So it became very clear that a prolonged lockdown is not something that is sustainable. As we speak, although we have had a partial easing of the lockdown, at least we have seen some activities in the financial services sector, in the manufacturing, in office administration, some offices have been opening and so on. But some key sectors of the economy are still under complete lockdown as we speak. I'm talking here of the hospitality industry. So this has to do with all the hotels and all of that. And this is a sector that employs a whole lot of people, directly and indirectly, many of them small businesses that supply one thing or the other. And this is a sector that is also highly labor intensive. The entertainment industry is also under complete lockdown as we speak. I know what entertainment industry means for employment and jobs in Nigeria, particularly in the cities. We have the musicians, the caterers, the rental business people, the decorators, the people who are the tailors, the fashion designers, the makeup artists, the photographers, the video camera people, all sorts of people, the Ashwebi people. There are so many, it's a very long chain of people that have been denied their livelihood. Then, of course, we have the aviation sector, which is also under complete lockdown as we speak. So all of these are still impacting greatly on the economy, both in terms of jobs and in terms of revenue. Revenue to government and revenue to businesses and incomes to individuals. So obviously, of course, the issue of the health security is very paramount. But what I think is important at this stage is for us to see how we can balance what we do with issues of preserving health and what we do about preserving livelihood. So both lives and livelihood are very critical. So what we are proposing, at least in the private sector, is for us to come up with the right kind of framework, possibly sector-specific framework on how we can, deal with the issue of managing the protocols for each of these sectors so that we can manage the spread and support the containment strategies of government. For me, this is the way to go because this pandemic is not something that will go away anytime soon, and we cannot perpetually continue to lock down critical sectors of the economy.
All right, it's interesting, life and livelihood, then the balancing act. We also do that taking cognizance of the nature of a pandemic in question. All of that should come into consideration to be able to have a good balancing act. We appreciate your contribution. Let me remain in Lagos and also talk to Dr. Timothy Olaolu, Director General of Nigerian Employers Consultative Association. Sir, what has become a common phenomenon since the advent of COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdowns across the globe has been loss of jobs for some class of workers. This is resulting from the lockdown. Now, we are easing the lockdown to give chance to other aspects of life, which of course is the economy. Now that we are staging a comeback, what in your opinion should be the right steps to take? Perhaps one, to reabsorb whoever may have lost his job. And again, to sustain those sectors that hitherto had, of course, sacked their workers. Banks are also inclusive in this. So what would you like to see going forward?
Very much. I want to start by saying that the issue of laying off workers or employees is a very difficult option that ordinarily any right-thinking employer or employer that value not only his relationship with his employees, or that also would recollect the massive investment that has gone into developing these employees, will hesitate before taking that option. And that is why you discover that in instances where that option is embraced, like we usually tell our members, we said it should be an option to be considered when it becomes extremely inevitable. In other words, you've considered other options, you've taken other steps, you've don't cut here and there to sustain your business and you have no option. Rather than become an irresponsible or rascal employer, you could consider that option following laid down rules and regulations. With regards to taking back those who might have suffered one separation or the other with their employers, we have also said that it is very mandatory as long as it is not disciplinary measures that necessitated that particular separation. If also it is not a matter of redundancy, which means they are surplus to requirements and you are not supposed to replace. Whatever the case is, it should be those employees that were laid off on account of the inability of you to continue to sustain them on the wage bill that should be first considered with regards to recalling. Let me also say that with regards to the easing of lockdown, I will say that we are not doing well with managing the issue of responsibility, especially with regards to how people have decided to flout the several protocols that has been set both by government and industry operators. Especially also take into consideration the use of the public facilities like the banks, commuters, and the non-implementation of transportation codes and the regulations that has been set by government. And that is why also we have advised our members that you separate what you have control over and what you don't have control over. With regards to the use of public transportation in helping your workers, we have encouraged most of the organizations that could afford introducing more staff buses to do so. That way, they reduce the contacts of their employees vis-a-vis the use of public transport. You also discover that we have also introduced more of finding more accommodation spaces for employees, especially in the factories, so that this issue of commuting by public transport will also be reduced. Having said that, you might want to ask me that because of all these gaps that we have ensured, that we have observed, is it enough for us to go back and say, yes, we should resume lockdown? I will say an absolute no. Rather, what we should try to do is to look at why we have not lived up to expectation. And I think it's more of issues of monitoring and enforcement. Monitoring of compliance and ensuring that we mitigate all those gaps. Enforcement by involving those who are even operators in those particular sectors, especially, for instance, compliance in industries. You discover that the enforcement, the representative bodies are not involved. And this is very important so that they can also take the destiny of their members in their hands and ensure that they do what is right. Enforcement with regards to public transport should also involve the national unions and the employers in those sectors so that we can get it right. And on this note, I also want to say that we can always improve in whatever we have done so far, observe the gaps, and move on into higher level of compliance. So those are my initial thoughts.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Olawale, joining us via Skype from Lagos. Let's go over to our Benin Network Center where we will introduce Professor Mike Obada. Professor Mike Obada, give us your own assessment, just from mere casual observation. How much paralysis has the Nigerian economy suffered on account of the various measures introduced to contain COVID-19? And therefore, from that level of paralysis, is it a time for us to begin to wake up? Are we going to wake up gradually or wake up suddenly so that livelihoods get protected ultimately?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Yes, the Nigerian economy has suffered, a large degree of paralysis because of the lockdown. Most production activities outside the agro-allied industrial framework, the pharmaceuticals and medical industries, and essential industries. Nearly all other sectors have had to be shut down in one way or the other, particularly in states where the lockdowns have been quite strong and highly enforced. Having said that, I will want to say that in considering the issue of reopening the economy or continuing a lockdown, we must note one very important point about the relationship between and the health of the economy. The health of the people is very important. In the same way, the health of the economy is important. They mutually reinforce each other. But there cannot be a trade-off, between health of the economy and health of the people. For the simple reason that, life lost, cannot be replaced. Survived by healthy people. And so, loss of lives, is not really acceptable in the bid to reopen the economy or make the economy work. And so I would say that, yes, as had been mentioned, there is need for a balance. But that balance is not the judicial kind of balance, whereby perhaps you're talking about equality and so on. The balance will have to be disproportionate in favor of the health of the people. In other words, we have to reopen the economy in such a way that the loss of lives is minimum. That will be very, very important. You remember the Great Depression, which lasted for many years, from 1929, to the 1930s. At the end of it all, the economies revived. People, came up with good policies, and the economies revived and even became stronger in the context of the globalization. And so our own economies can also revive when we take measures to ensure that the people are healthy. Now, having said that, I will say that, yes, we cannot continue to lock down, but the reopening has to be done in a very sensible and responsible way. We cannot continue to lock down the economy forever because we do not even know when the coronavirus will ultimately be contained. And the treatment is not quite certain, and the development of a vaccine is not, in sight immediately. And so the reopening of the economy has to be, done in a very responsible way, while at the same time, government, intensifies the implementation of the various social distancing, measures and protocols to ensure that, the disease is gradually and ultimately contained. Let me say that in reopening the economy, I got one very important point from Muda Yusuf's intervention. The need for a framework to reopen the economy in a gradual way. That framework, I can say, should consider the nature of an economy. An economy is made up of essentially of production activities, distribution, stroke marketing of activities, rendering of services, and, very importantly, exchange of goods and services. Now, to the extent that, remedies have not been found to the coronavirus, and the only major, strategy as at the moment to, deal with the situation, prevent further spread, is social distancing. We have to take cognizance of which of those activities, production, distribution, exchange services, are amenable to social distancing, and then use that one as a basis, for reopening the economy. Even within the activity sectors, production, exchange, marketing, is still possible. It is the case that certain activities are amenable to the implementation and enforcement of social distancing regimes than others. So we have to identify the various sectors and say which of them, if we implement social distancing regimes very, very faithfully, will not create problems, will not exacerbate the pandemic. And if we do that one, then definitely we can easily begin by saying these so and so activities or sectors should be reopened, followed by these sectors, followed by these other activities.
All right, thank you. This issue of balancing, has become very strategic in this connection, and we seem to have a delicate situation here, Kingsley. This balancing, I hope it's not going to be a little to the right and a little to the left, as we had it those days. Thank you. Let's bring in Associate Professor of Business Entrepreneurship and Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Kaduna State, and that's Yeshua Ango. Prof, I want to take you on from what Dr. Moda Yusuf said in his opening remarks. He actually enumerated the litany of entrepreneurial businesses that suffered a stagnation during this lockdown. And now that the government is, of course, eyeing the ease of the lockdown, how would these persons begin to operate? These are people and, of course, individuals who are involved in exchange of service, who are involved in, direct contact with people that they provide service to. Now, talking about distancing, Michael Bada just said that, look, there should be opening of businesses that are amenable to social distancing. And in this regard, there are many entrepreneurial activities that may not necessarily be amenable to social distancing. How will such persons operate? How will this comeback be for those entrepreneurs?
Thank you very much. Like has been said by other speakers, this is a delicate, very delicate.
We seem to have lost signals from Kano, but then, of course, our engineers are on top of it, and perhaps within a short period of time, we'll be able to get him reconnected, and we'll, take the question. Let's come back to Abuja here, where, of course, we have Uche Owaleke, a professor of capital market. And, of course, capital market has been hit below the belt, within this period of lockdown. So, give us a picture, if you could, of what happened in this period and how can this comeback be effective, in the capital market?
Well, thanks, Kieran. Permit me to start by saluting all those, out there in the field, working. This period of lockdown, a lot of people at home, but there are people that are out taking care of the sick and doing other essential services, including you, the media people, and the security men as well, men and women. So I doff my hat, for them, and I pray that God will continue to strengthen them in this critical period. Now, having said that, it's important. I mention it that the issue of the lockdown. There is no doubt that the lockdown has impacted positively on the rate of the spread. If we weren't for the lockdown, maybe we wouldn't be talking about 5,900 today. Maybe we'll be talking about a figure that is much bigger than it is. Remember, the first the index case was on 27th of February. Between that time and now, we are looking at a figure that is less than 6,000, fewer than 6,000. If you compare that with what the rate of spread in India, a country like India, Brazil, and the rest of them, you will discover that is quite low. And that's also where I commend the efforts of the government, the NCDC, the task force, on the much they have done. There is this study I stumbled on in connection with this. It was conducted by some researchers in a university in Germany, the Göttingen University in Germany. The researchers did a study on quantifying the impact of intervention efforts, by the German government. And what they found, is that the various restrictions and various lockdowns over a period of time, helped to reduce the spread and break the exponential growth of the pandemic. This study is also supported by another one in France, where French scientists also, discovered that the lockdown helped to reduce the spread of the SARS-CoV-2, by as much as 78% in France. But all these studies talked about the key success factors. They kept mentioning, testing. They kept mentioning contact tracing, physical distancing, and hygiene. That these four factors, contributed to the success rate. Now, having said that, it's also important to recognize that, on the other hand, you also have UNICEF, for example, warning that is also leading to an increase in death, from some other diseases. The lockdown is also resulting from increase in death from some other diseases. That maternal mortality, for example, is rising. That they have evidence that child mortality is also rising because people are confined to slums and in situations where they can't practice hygiene. There is no water, so children die from diarrhea. Children die from malnutrition because there is no money, and even malaria. And also remember that the World Health Organization has also warned that this is one disease. When I mean this disease is the COVID-19. The virus, I understand, is the SARS-CoV-2. That this is one disease that is bound to be with us for a long time. An official of WHO was saying that.
Yeah,
so
this
against that backdrop, against this backdrop,
how do you affect the capital market? I want you to link this up.
I'm putting it in context.
Okay.
Yes, I am saying that we can't afford. I want to submit that we can't afford to lock down, for a prolonged period of time. Okay. The capital market, of course, was just like every other, sector, was hit globally speaking. Virtually all the major indexes, if you take from the date the pandemic broke until now, it's the year-to-date return, let's take it from January, has been negative, including the Nigerian stock market, where year-to-date return is down by as much as 10%. But in the case of Nigeria, I must mention the measures put in place by the regulatory authorities, particularly the SEC and the Nigerian Stock Exchange, requiring the intermediaries, the institutions, the exchanges to activate business continuity, processes, have helped. Remote trading is going on. We have not had the level of disruption in that sector as we've had in others. So you could say there is seamless continuity in the activities in the stock market. As I said, trading is still going on. As a matter of fact, last month, the month of April, the market gained by as much as 8%. It was one of the best performing in the world, as much as 8%. So we have not seen much disruptions in the stock market, as we have seen in other, and the financial sector in general, have been somewhat, resilient. Again, thanks to the, previous efforts by the CBN in ensuring that financial soundness indicators, have been quite strong. If you look at the non-performing ratios in the banks, okay, before now, it was trending down. A lot of banks too, in terms of capital adequacy ratios, that was also strong. So, given that the financial sector, I can tell you, did not suffer so much disruptions. And again, even the lockdown, the government exempted them. So financial services were still going on. The stock market, the stock exchange didn't close. It was open. People were doing remote trading. Okay, so I would say. And of course, the telecom sector too, the bright spots, in all this, also didn't suffer. So apart from the other sectors, Yusuf mentioned earlier, aviation, hospitality, and so on. Financial sector, in particular, telecom sector, the agri sector to some extent too, didn't suffer as much disruption, as we, had experience in other sectors.
Okay, Professor Waleke, thank you very much. We still haven't been able to clear up our connection to Kano. I'm sure once it's sorted out, we'll return to Yushao Ango to take on this first question. Let's return to Professor Mike Obadan in Benin. Professor Mike Obadan, I mean, in terms of seeking to balance the need for people to stay healthy and be alive under the pandemic, and then for them to continue to earn a living, that's a very tough one. But some persons have argued that the peculiar circumstances of each environment will have to be considered. I mean, if you were to take a look, for instance, at the United States, which has so far the highest death toll from COVID-19, you're having all kinds of arguments as to whether or not to reopen the economy, and if reopening the economy, to what extent should the various economies, particularly at the state level, should be reopened. The U.S. is recording some of the highest numbers of unemployed persons right now. And that's a society that ordinarily has some safety net by way of social security. But in an environment where the social security network isn't as firm or is inchoate in the sense that it's just being built up, how much can we do in terms of continuing to extend the lockdown, bearing in mind also that we have a number of persons who are self-employed in this environment?
Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. A very important question. But again, the very critical issue is, what do we want? The health of the people, or the health of the economy, or both? In other words, are we in a position to trade off, health, for economic recovery? And you made a very important point, in terms of the U.S. experience. Yes, the U.S. has very robust, social safety network to the extent that even the unemployed people, those who are falling into unemployment now, are being catered for, with cash transfers, unemployment benefits, and so on. We don't have that one in our environment. That would ordinarily have put some pressure on us to say, okay, let us, unlock the economy, let our people, begin to participate actively in production, service activities, and so on, to get their means of livelihood. But the problem for me, Kingsley, is this, and I think it was adverted to earlier by one of our guests in Lagos. Do Nigerians generally exhibit the level of discipline and responsibility to be able to help themselves in these difficult times by maintaining the required social distancing, protocols and associated, activities, to be able to prevent themselves from catching the disease or getting the disease spread further? The answer is no. From the little experience that we've had with the partial easing of activity in some states, it's very clear that most Nigerians do not seem to have that level of discipline. They don't have that level of responsibility. Some of them, I'm sorry to say, tended to go berserk once they appear to have seen what they call freedom. You see massive congregations at various activities in banks, in markets, and so on. And so we must factor that one in our efforts to move forward. And that's why, yes, the experiences in some states may differ, even in terms of, trying to ease up, activities. But generally, the principle must be we want to preserve the health of the people. It's healthy people that participate in economic activities, that go to work, produce goods, and create wealth, for the economy. And we must then be able to identify those set of activities where we can enforce social distancing regulations very, very easily. And that one can be done. And, there are a number of activities. For example, government already has exempted agricultural activities from, the lockdown. Farming and farming and agricultural activities, food production activities. But then what I will add, that one definitely will remain unlocked. And, the government would have to come in here in order to ensure food security, to ensure that some form of protection is given to farmers, against, marauders, those who harass them on the farms, those who discourage them from carrying on their farm activities, like the herdsmen. That one is there. And I believe that for the formal sector, social distancing is very likely to be enforced fairly easily. For the large enterprises, the medium enterprises, the management should be able to ensure responsible social distancing that can, prevent the spread of the virus. It's in the informal sector that the problem is. Most informal sector activities will involve aggregation of people, through markets and some social activities. So those ones definitely cannot be unlocked immediately. They will be unlocked towards the tail end, of the whole episode. So generally, Kingsley, I believe that we should be very, very mindful. The situation in the U.S. is a bit different from our own, that we don't have any major political activities in mind, this year or even next year. What is driving the situation in the U.S. is the major political activity in November, the elections, and so on. And that is why even when the number is rising, the president is insisting for a rapid reopening of the economy. I think we cannot afford that kind of strategy in Nigeria because of many factors, one of which is the ability to respond in Nigeria is very low. Testing capacity is very limited. Treatment is on the low side, and one is not sure about it. And so, whatever we do by way of reopening the economy, which should be done very cautiously and gradually.
All right. Thank you indeed. We are going to Kano again. Our guest there, Yushao Angu, Associate Professor of Business Entrepreneurship, has been reconnected, and we can now talk to him. Prof, we lost you at the very beginning when you were about to give us your opening remarks. I hope you still remember the question. If not, I could just refresh your memories on that. I was actually asking a question in connection with Nigerians who are in entrepreneurial businesses who provide the major services that you cannot do without having an interpersonal relationship and being close to one another and what have you. And we are thinking of the ease of lockdown, which the government started embarking upon. How would this class of businessmen, be able to cope with perhaps the measures put in place like social distancing and what have you? But if you don't mind too, you can also tell us about how this class of business people have suffered during the stagnation brought about by the lockdown. We seem to be having an issue with that connection there. So
yeah, I don't know. That's sometimes stuff happens, as the saying goes. Let's see if we can go over to Lagos, back to our two guests who are with us via Skype. Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is Director General of LCCI, that's Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. That's him there on the right side of the screen. And then Timothy Olawale of NECA, that's the Employer Consultative Association. Gentlemen, but let's starting off with Muda Yusuf again. Let's try and do some just rough mathematics with respect to this. Here we are. Okay, lockdown continues. All the social issues that you have raised, along with other guests, with particular reference to the non-observance of the protocols, those issues are noted. Now, assuming we're to say elongate the lockdown further, so that we prevent further community transmission of this virus. The realistic view is that this virus is going to be around for a while. So how long, therefore, can you possibly extend the lockdown? And if you extend the lockdown, businesses will continue to suffer, especially when those businesses don't belong on the essential list of services or production that should remain open. We're already seeing a request, a demand, or a campaign for stimulus packages for various sectors of the economy. Now, if those sectors remain in a lockdown mode, where will the stimulus package come from? From a government that is already getting hard-pressed in terms of its own finances, and from businesses that it cannot now raise taxes?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, all over the world, the governments are stepping in to see how they can salvage businesses. Because you need a vibrant, business sector. You need the investment for you to even ensure the sustainability of the economy itself. I think it's a question of reevaluating our priorities and supporting businesses as much as we can. We have seen these examples in many climes, and this stimulus is not coming only from government. We have seen some interventions, for instance, from the Central Bank of Nigeria, talking about the moratorium that have been given to those who are beneficiaries of the CBN intervention funds. We have seen interest concession from the Central Bank. Some commercial banks have also taken some steps, but not far enough from what we gather from operators in the economy. We have the tax authorities also giving some leeway, some room for taxpayers to be able to have some breathing space. We also have seen some concessions in the area of regulatory fees, in the area of tariffs and so on. We need to see more of that. So it is not everything that is also about taking money from the purse of government to support businesses. There are other measures that can be put in place, because if you don't support businesses, you need the businesses to be able to support the government. You need the businesses to be able to support the economy with employment. So that is why it is key, and that is why if the government needs to also reorder its priorities to see how this kind of support needs to be given, if we need to look at some projects, if we need to look at our expenditure spending structure and see how we can create room to support businesses to come alive. Once the businesses come alive, then things can begin to get normalized. So that is the sense in which I think we should be looking at it. For instance, look at the aviation sector completely, for almost 2 months, nothing is happening. Some of them are still paying a lot of fees, a lot of lease fees, there are regulatory charges, there are rental fees, all these fees are accumulated. Some of them are indebted to the banks. The banks are calculating their interest. Look at the hotels. The hotels have been grounded for almost 2 months now. Costs are running. We have a lot of fixed costs that they are incurring. So it is not in the interest of anybody for businesses to go down. So whatever sacrifice that the government needs to make to ensure that businesses don't go down, I think it is important for those sacrifices to be made. It is not so much for those businesses. It is more about the totality of the economy. Because if you don't have jobs, if you don't have revenue, how are you going to even manage the economy? How are you going to manage the social consequences of joblessness? So that is why I believe that we need to prioritize government expenditure. And in all of this, we need to also do a proper risk assessment. Just as Professor Obada said, we have more challenges in the informal sector than the formal sector. In the formal sector, the level of compliance is quite high, even beyond the protocols that have been prescribed by government. A lot of companies have even gone beyond that. Many workers are now working remotely, from home, just to ensure that this social distancing is complied with. So the protocols in the formal sector is quite high. So if you do a proper risk assessment, you should be able to identify areas in which the government needs to focus more in terms of enforcement, in terms of monitoring and all of that. There are some sectors of the economy that, can easily comply. I saw a document, for instance, from the Hotel Association about how they plan, the proposal they are giving to government, to the Lagos state government, on how they plan to reopen in order to comply with the COVID-19 protocols. Very excellent presentation. And if that is allowed, they can begin to open gradually. So we need to have a proper risk assessment so that we don't lock up what we should not be locking up. We should identify areas that present the highest risk and zero in on that and see how we can strengthen enforcement and compliance in those areas.
The two key words, compliance and assessment. And from the experience we had in the past weeks that Nigeria embarked on lockdown, compliance is not up to 50% based on records. So it is important to note that as we ease the lockdown, there are expectations, and whatever that is going to be, we'll live to see that. You are watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we get back, the conversation continues.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our engineers say to us that they have broken the Kano jinx, so we're going over to our Kano Network Center now. Yushao Ango, Associate Professor, if you can hear us clearly, we hope we can also hear you clearly. Just to rephrase the question that my colleague Kirian posed earlier, in your opinion, what are the most acute entrepreneurial challenges arising from the various measures aimed at containing the coronavirus? That's one. And secondly, in the light of the comments made by the other guests, for how long more can this lockdown persist without breaking the backs of entrepreneurs?
Virtually every entrepreneurial activity has been affected substantially. I will not say every, but almost all entrepreneurial activities. But I think what is clear is that it is hitting more the informal sector, the service sector in particular, more than any other sector. If you look at it, And it also even affects even the agricultural sector that was exempt in reality. Why? Because if you look at the value chain of the activities, it is allowed for goods to move, from one state to another, as long as they are food items. But however, the local markets are not taking place, where these goods can be brought to market, except where the farmers themselves have the capacity to load their goods and carry them all over. The hardest hit, obviously, the hospitality industry, like has been stated, transport industry, especially logistics, transport in terms of passenger transport, and then aviation. Those sectors have been heavily affected. Also affected are if you like, the commerce sector, because every day that there is some relax, that is the day that you see a lot of commercial activities taking place. So that has been affected substantially. The manufacturing has been affected, but the mining has been affected somewhat. But those ones are easily managed and they can easily fit in to the new, if you like, or any protocol that is given to them. What is the difficulty, or rather, or the challenge, the major challenge, is that we have quite a number of people, business entrepreneurs, small business entrepreneurs, who earn their monies on a daily basis, who have to come out, for them to be able to get some income for that day. Now, certainly we need to ensure health and well-being of our people, but at the same time, what can we do about these millions of people who need to come out and earn their daily bread? Now, it's a very delicate thing, and like Prof said, we are not trying to say we are giving one for the other, no, but certainly we have to come out with the protocols that will allow easing of these various processes. Now, what we need to do, in my opinion, because I don't know that I'll have the opportunity, is for those sectors that can comply easily with meaningful protocols to come out, like Muda said, like, for example, the example of the hospitality industry, hotel owners in Lagos. They should come out with their own, idea of how to manage this thing. And if they do that, and if it's acceptable to government, they should allow them. So that is how they should pace it. However, that is number one. Number two, we need to now, then it means we need to go into self-regulation somewhat. Other sectors, like I said, the transport industry or the aviation sector, they should come up with their own also. They should come up, even though this is a global one, but even for local transportation within the aviation sector, they should come out with their own suggestions as to ways to manage it. But my major concern, sincerely, is with the itinerant traders and small businessmen and others that are affected. The farmers are affected also, surprisingly, because there is no market, really. Weekly markets takes place here, where you can go and buy things. If those markets are not existing, where will the farmers take their goods to? Now, if they are not able to take their goods to the markets and sell, then they may not be able to also buy, fertilizer and all those things and inputs now that the rainy season is around. Then we may have problem, because it means we may not have enough food commodities in the next season. The one luck we have, and we thank God for that, is that there is food, in Nigeria. Imagine if there was no attention given to agriculture before now, it would have been more serious. So I am concerned about what will happen by next year, because if farmers cannot go to farms because they cannot get inputs, because they don't have the money, because they could not sell their previous year's outputs, then there will be challenge. So these are areas in which I think some things need to be done, especially to ease the lockdown. The lockdown, unfortunately, has to be eased, even though we have not seen the end of the pandemic. It has to be eased because of the reality on ground. People are really there, and every opportunity you give them 2 hours, 3 hours to come out, they come out in drops. So I think we need to work quickly, to release those sectors that can be released immediately. Others, then we need to do a lot more enlightenment, but then we have to release, especially the small-scale businessmen and entrepreneurs.
Let's remain with you, but very briefly, I wanted to address this issue. We're talking about stimulus from government. What kind of stimulus will you be proposing for entrepreneurial businesses across the nation, assuming government comes up with a palliative, because palliative is now in different forms. It could be commodities, it could be food items, as well as some funding of some businesses that may have, had very bad, impact or experienced bad impact, of COVID-19 during the lockdown. What kind of stimulus are you expecting for this class of business?
That is very good. The central bank has said they are coming up with some stimulus, and government is coming up with various stimulus packages. My suggestion, number one, is to give stimulus to, as much as possible, small-scale business people. That is, by giving them loans that are of lower interest rates, by waiving a lot of charges, and this has been done in some cases. That needs to be done. I think one sector that needs stimulus seriously is the aviation sector. Otherwise, they will just collapse after this exercise. Another sector, of course, is the hospitality sector, and then the transportation sector. I'm talking about transportation sector, all of it, but especially those who are involved in passenger transportation. They're not doing it again. So the small scale, the transport, not the banks, not the big corporations, because those have been enjoying all the stimulus in Nigeria all this while. I think what we need to do is to give stimulus to sectors that will actually bring up the economy. We know the importance of agriculture to this economy. We know the importance of industry to this economy, and those are growing sectors. We know the importance of services, yes, but not all services that should be provided with this. Those services that have been badly affected, and they need to actually, because we need them to retain their staff. We don't want them to send away their staff. I saw a video of one of the bank chief executives saying that they have realized they don't need these people, they don't need those people, and they want to lay them off. That is very common with banks. I don't want to see this stimulus going to banks or any very big, strong organizations that can actually take care of themselves. I want to see it going more to those lower levels, that it will actually boost the economy and ensure that we don't go into recession. But particularly, more importantly, I want to see government, patronizing Nigerian products, wherever they are. That is stimulus in itself. If we can patronize Nigerian businesses for various things that we're doing or that are contained in the budget, whatever we can implement, I think that is also stimulus in a way. We should not patronize foreign contractors or whoever if we can actually get Nigerian businesses that can do or provide some services or goods. So I think that is the kind of stimulus we need. We need to do it from the bottom up, in my opinion.
Thank you very much there for your comments. I want to come back to Professor Uwaleke in the studios. Still on the stimulus package, what is the nature and texture of the stimulus you would like to see? Bearing in mind the views that have already been expressed, in particular Usual and Muda. Muda was saying, for instance, we're looking at the aviation industry and say, look, the airlines, they have all kinds of, if you like, statutory fees to pay, parking, landing fees, and so on and so forth. Could the government, rather than just say, look, here is 1 billion or 10 billion, take, could the government then say, using its own various agencies, say, look, write off all of this? So it would be a shortfall in government revenue. So can the stimulus be in kind in terms of waiver of fees due from government? That's one leg of it. Second leg could also be, okay, what exactly do we want to see from the exposures they have to the financial services sector? I mean, you're a finance expert. They have loans that are running. What can the central bank do and the bankers committee do in terms of those loans? Because it's a bad business season for everybody, by the way.
Yes, Kingsley, you have said it all. In terms of stimulus packages, to this sector, particularly the airline sector. Of course, the central bank already has a package. Part of the 50 billion naira package, is also meant for the airline sector. Even though I think, in my view, that kind of money may not really be sufficient for them to meet their needs. For example, the 50 billion package has a 20 million cap, that a business can access. And if you look at the qualifying sectors, airline is one of them. So I think the airline industry should be moved to a bigger funding package outside of the 50 billion. So the airline, of course, they will need cash. They will need the waiver, that you talked about, particularly, cash, particularly working capital. The central bank, apart from the 50 billion, has other stimulus packages. I understand they have over 1 trillion. In fact, the total package they have, according to the central bank, is in excess of 3 trillion. So the airline industry, can take a good chunk of that, to be able to, to stay afloat. And let me also say quickly, the IMF has, projected that the economy is going to tank by as much as 3.4%, even worse than the world average of 3%. And the extent, of course, that's a forecast. The extent to which this happens will depend on how long we prolong this lockdown. The budget is has a deficit of 5.3 trillion, the 2020 budget, meaning government is going to borrow so much, this year, in addition to the money they said they'll get from privatization, okay? And that money needs to be injected into the economy to stimulate activities. So that also means that we need to relax this thing, gradually. Other countries are doing that. Greece, in spite of the high rate of infection, has also eased lockdown. Even in India, India has over, as we speak, has over 90,000 positive cases. But India has lifted interstate, movement. Ditto for countries like Italy and even Brazil. So what we are saying is we need this phased program. And later today, when the president addresses the nation, I expect to hear that there's a phased program. UK has put in place a 3-step program. India has 5. So we should also have a phased program of gradually relaxing the lockdown. And Nigerian place, permit me to say this, in the education sector, for example, research centers are not supposed to be under lockdown. I just cited a case of 2 studies, one in Germany, one in France, all around about this period, providing reliable data, to the NCDC for whatever actions they're doing, because whatever they're doing should be evidence-based. So universities should not be ghost towns. If you go to universities today that are ghost towns, even when ASU is on strike, there's one function of a university lecturer that doesn't go on strike, and that's research.
That was part of the initial response, that all schools, primary, secondary, and tertiary, should be closed to prevent community transmission.
Yes, I'm saying research. In university, you do teaching, units, you do research, you do community service. Research should be allowed to, be ongoing. Our labs, for example, should be open. Lecturers should feel free, to go there and do their personal research.
Prof, we have to pause you here and get the final thoughts from Dr. Omoda Yusuf, who's the Director General of Lagos Chamber of, or rather, let's go to Olaole, actually, Dr. Timothy Olaole, the DG of Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, NECA. We are talking about stimulus this time around, and what, in your opinion, should be the right step to take with respect to a stimulus? Well, we cannot, hear from Timothy because we have a freezing situation there. So rather return to Abuja here and try and conclude the program.
Kieran, I understand he's back.
He's back. Okay. Can we hear him? Can we hear Dr. Timothy Olaole, please? Can we hear? I hope you heard my question. We're talking about stimulus that government is rolling out to, of course, back up business activities.
Like I said, there has been several proposals with regards to stimulus packages in time past to government. And I can just review some of them. We've spoken about issues of waivers, suspension, or tax deferrals. We've spoken about tax credits. We've spoken about wage subsidies. We've spoken about even utility support, as it's been done in some other climes. However, I think what we should do now, because one thing is for you to suggest various stimulus package. Another thing is for those packages to be within the capacity of government to implement. And what we are recommending is that now there should be a tripartite meeting for government, labor, and work and employers to come together to discuss what is within the capacity of government to do to retain jobs and to also support businesses. And we'll be able to agree on specifics. It is said that you cannot shave someone's head behind his back. There are many stimulus packages that have been rolled out by government, even by CBN. Therefore, organized businesses, they are not really attractive because most of these businesses are already highly indebted. And you are now rolling out further packages, albeit at lower interest rates, but indebtedness is indebtedness. Like it's been done elsewhere, what is the capacity of government to give grants with regards to supporting businesses? Let me also quickly say, before we close, that with regards to what we need to do, much has been said about hospitality sector. I think what we need to do is, as employers of labor, we are taking sectors by sectors and also putting together issues that could be addressed by us as proposals to help government. All the initiatives should not come from government. We are the ones that wear the shoes we now wear it pinches. As a matter of fact, this morning, we are dealing with the issue of hospitality sector where leaders in the businesses are coming together in Neck House to make proposal to government on the gradual easing of the sector. This same week, we are also doing for aviation sector. These proposals will go to government and will identify likely risk that should be concerned to both operators, to government and the society. And
all right, Timothy Olawale, thank you very much, and indeed the other guys, Kirian. We have a number of tweets that have come in, but we're unable to take those tweets. We'd like to thank you for sending in your tweets. There are a number of issues that our guests have raised this morning, and I see a number of matters outstanding, which hopefully we will take on later in the week or indeed on some other occasion when we revisit this subject matter on the gradual reopening of the economy. Kieran, one crucial question. We're talking about stimulus package, which tended to dominate the latter part of our conversation. Now, the tendency has been to say focus on big business. What about the small businesses and then the private individuals? Italy, for instance, placed a moratorium on repayment of mortgages. Small businesses have rent to pay. Even those who work and have not receiving money still have that. Yeah.
Barbers,
all right, that's right.
Okay, what have you.
That's right. So let's thank all our guests in Kano, Yoshua Ango, in Benin, Professor Mike Obadan, in Lagos via Skype, Muda Yusuf, and Timothy Olawale, and right here in the Abuja studios, Professor Waleke. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us on the program today. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kirian Umayo. Thank you for watching. See you again tomorrow.